Oh, folks are coming in. Welcome. Okay, we got a few attendees already. Hello. As you come in, let us know what city you're in. Oh, Ellie. I
Modesto.
will do the
Oh, it's
formal.
Tiffany.
Ellie, I will control the deck because we forgot to do the remote control.
Okay.
And I don't want anybody else to do the
Okay.
hello, welcome. As you are coming in, you'll see that the chat is open. So we'd love for you guys to engage in the chat and let us know where you are located. Tell us what city you're in.
Can we make
Modesto.
Tiffany, can we make Tiffany a host?
Yes, let me see if I see. I do see Tiffany. Let's see. Promote to panelists. Got it. Okay. Thank you for that reminder. San Diego, Los Angeles. Okay, we got some Southern California, East Bay. Checking in from New York. Hi, New York. See what else or how do they greet folks in New York? Yo, what's up? What's a New York greeting? Pittsburgh, South Bay. Perfect.
Oh, Tiffany, do you want to have your video up?
Wow.
I could turn my video off. Just heads up, guys. I'm going to be here watching the chat and helping answer those questions.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tiffany. Okay, let's see. New Jersey, Arizona, South City. Perfect. So tonight's topic is wealth starts with you. So we're going to start with the question. When you think of the word wealth, for you personally, what comes to mind? So if you could just share in the chat, when you think of the word wealth, what comes to mind? And with that, we're going to respect your time and get started. My name is Brenda Wyatt. I am with LaSalle Mortgage. I'm an Oakland native and a second generation real estate professional. I bought my first house when I was 27. I used my tax return refund. It's tax time, so something to think about for your refund. But I used my refund and down payment assistance to buy my first house. And I didn't really feel educated through the process. And so I started diving into real estate and using my degree in accounting and finance, I fell in love with being a mortgage advisor. So today I specialize in helping others learn more about home buying, down payment assistance programs, and just support folks in their home buying journey.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I grew up in the Bay Area, specifically in Albany, California, which is where I work now. My whole family is from here, so I'm a super, super Bay Area person. I went to the University of California, Berkeley, and then soon after graduating college, I started working in tech. A lot of what I use when I list properties is that knowledge set that was kind of based in that creativity and strategic thinking and using language and design to influence outcomes. But the work that I do now is so much more meaningful and important to me. I work in partnership with my mom. We're realtors here in Berkeley. And one of the most profound things I did for myself in my life was buy a house when I was 24 using some kind of scrappy strategies that I had to pull together by just being really obsessive and reading a lot of stuff online and taking a lot of risks. And that turned into being one of the most kind of powerful drivers in my life of the financial of my financial health. And so much of what I do in my work now as a realtor is try to share that information widely and for free. I do a lot of that on social media, and that is kind of the genesis of doing a webinar like this, is because of how much I felt like that those tips and tricks resonated with people. So when we're talking about wealth, and Brenda kind of alluded to this when we first started, but we're curious what other people think when they hear that word and what that means to you. Brenda, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So, wealth, here we just have the traditional definition. Everything you own that has value, money, property, investments, or anything else that helps you build financial security and have a comfortable life. It's not just about how much you make, but what you keep and grow over time. And from a financial perspective, I think it starts with small steps. It starts with small steps like having a budget. So if you have a budget, put fire signs in the chat. Some folks just receive their check and just spend without managing what's coming in and what needs to go out. So you want to first start with having a budget, but we also need to think about our mindset, right? Mindset is very important in setting your goals and being real with yourself about what it is you want and how you're going to get there. Habits come into play, and we live in a time where we have 15 subscription streaming services. We have Apple taking out $16.99, 18 times a month. We have all of these automated things that are going out that we need to stop to see actually how much money we have and where is it going. So me personally, on Sundays, I call my Sundays Sunday Fun Day, FUND day. And it's where on Sunday mornings, I take quiet time and I actually look at my numbers. And knowing what I'm expecting for my check, knowing exactly where it needs to go, I categorize my expenses by the things that are necessary, like my mortgage or rent is not optional, car, things like that. But then by categorizing it, I can see where I'm spending too much. I can edit things and make decisions. So I want to encourage everyone here as we are making our plan for wealth to make sure that we are starting with the small things, and that will help us get to something major like buying a house. Anything you want to add to that, Ellie?
I kind of want to speak to what I know is on the next slide, which I think is a important jumping off place for a lot of people when we start. Oh, never mind. I thought it was a different
Oh,
slide. When we
oh, this
start
was
talking about, no, it's all good. When we start talking about buying a house, and I just kind of want to make space for the idea that buying a house is a major expense. And for those of us who are just working people, that means that we have to give up other things, right? And so I say this to clients all the time that it's actually not everyone's goal to buy a house, and that's okay. And that there's things that you sacrifice when you buy a home, right? Like there's wonderful things in life like traveling and going out to eat all the time or having experiences and going to concerts and what have you, um, that are great and important to some people, and that you may have to give up for the sake of another endeavor, right? Which might be buying a home. So throughout my life at various times, I've given up some of those things because I had other goals that were more important to me, right? Like building wealth for my future, like what my life would look like in 10 years. But I just want to touch on the fact that like if you want to spend your 20s and 30s traveling all the time, buying a house might not make sense, and that is okay. It's just a different value system. But I encourage people to think about that before they, enter into this because that is the reality. So anyway, okay, let's just dive right in. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of background on my life and kind of my path thus far and how I got there and what's worked for me and what hasn't. So, like I mentioned earlier, I bought my first house when I was 24. I kind of just made up the idea on my own. Nobody, no adults in my life owned a home. Um, Actually, my parents bought a house in 2007 when I was 12, and they lost their house in 2008, which, as you can imagine, was traumatic for my family and stressful for me as a little kid and as the oldest child with a lot of little siblings. And I felt really responsible for our kind of well-being and really anxious about what was happening. And so this idea was planted in me when I was really little that I wanted to grow up and I would own my own house and my life would be really stable and not feel chaotic and scary the way that that felt to me when I was a little kid. So when I was 23, I got this idea in my head. I had this pretty well-paying job. I made $96,000 a year. Okay. And I'm being really transparent about the numbers because I think that's important for you guys to understand the real numbers. Okay. So that was a lot for me as a single earner. That's not that much for two people, and many people buy a property with another person, right? With a partner. I wasn't partnered at the time, so it was just me, but maybe that number sounds really big, but less big when you think about two incomes. So I was suddenly making more money than I had ever made, right? I was a new college grad and I had a little bit of a savings account, okay? I figured out through my own research that I didn't have to put down 20% on a house. And that was kind of that like rocked my world, that idea. Okay. So I put down 3.5% on my first house. It cost $650,000. That's a photo of it. It was in East Oakland. I had a really specific goal when I bought that house, which was to make money off that house. And I was pretty single-minded about that. So I chose a house that was large enough for me to live in with roommates. I lived there with two girlfriends. You can, that's them. Those are my two friends. Each of them paid rent. I paid rent. I mean, we all, towards the mortgage, or I paid a portion towards the mortgage. And I did the math really specifically so that my portion of the mortgage was the same as the rent that I had been paying for my apartment prior. Okay. And that was an important part of the equation for me when I was figuring out how I could make this work in my life. So my down payment, that 3.5%, it was about $23,000. I was 24 years old, so that was like all of the money that I had in the whole entire world. And I literally, like, I was down to dollars by the time I closed. And that money came, I'm going to tell you really specifically because this was an important part of it. That money came from a little bit of savings, from selling some stock that I had acquired, and then borrowing against my 401k. And we'll touch on each of these things more deeply later in this class. But those are the three avenues that I had to pull some money together because I didn't have any money from my parents. And as a realtor, I can tell you a lot of people get money for their down payment from their parents. But that wasn't going to be the case for me. And maybe that's not going to be the case for you. And maybe that's why you're at this class. So, that was my down payment. And then once I was in that home, I lived there for 2 years. That's another important number to know because that's how that's the minimum amount of time to hold an asset without paying capital gains taxes when you sell. Okay. I did very minimal upgrades on that house, but they were all really high return on investment improvements. Okay, so like I said, I was really single-mindedly trying to make money off this house. If it was gonna be a house I was gonna live in for a long time, there were tons of things I would have wanted to change about it, but that wasn't my goal. This house always was a means to an end for me. So I just did little things here and there that I knew I would earn money on when I sold the house. So I have a lot of videos on my Instagram about what some of those improvements are, those high ROI things. But in this case, I replaced the Ray laminate floors, which many people do not like, with hardwood. That was one of the improvements I made. I painted and I did some upgrades to the kitchen. Okay, when all was said and done, and I sold that house 2 years later, sold it for $700,000. So it was only $500,000, no, $50,000 more than I had bought it for. But all in, my profit was about $70,000. And that was in part because of the rent that I had collected over time from roommates, $48,000 over 2 years that I had collected. Then we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the annual return rate on my investment, my $23,000 that I put down on that house, was about 81.5%. So when we think about this purely mathematically, and I know it's hard to divorce emotion from a purchase like buying a home, but we're just going to talk the numbers for now. My return rate was far, far higher than the highest yield savings account available, which is about 5.5%. Okay, so 82% ROI on my investment over 2 years. What was really critical to understand was that this wasn't an emotional purchase for me, and I wasn't in love with that house. I wasn't in love with that neighborhood, but that wasn't the point. I bought that house so that I could earn money to buy a house that I really did love by basically living for free, right? Because I got all of the money back that I paid towards my rent when I sold that house, and then that additional profit I was able to make off that house. So I didn't love living there, but I thought about it like a job, right? Like a second job, second source of income. And what I loved more than loving the house was the feeling of building towards my future. Okay. And then because I made a little bit of money off that house, right? I made $70,000 at the time. It was like more money than had ever seen in my life. And it would have taken me about 10 years to save that much money up that I earned in 2 years from my starter home. I used that money to buy a house I really do love that I live in now, and I've been slowly fixing up over the last 3 years. So I think my key takeaway from that is that and I know that there's other people outside of the Bay Area here in this class, but I'm just speaking to the market where I work and where I live and where my experience was, which was here in the Bay Area. Um, but the incredible power of real estate in the Bay Area is that the majority of the time it appreciates far more quickly than the average person can save. And that's a really powerful thing to understand when we're thinking about wealth, is that of course you can live in an apartment that you love and you can pay rent and you can save up a lot, right? But like I said previously, it would have taken me 10 years to save up the money that I made by living in that house by making a sacrifice to live somewhere that I wasn't in love with. So the incredible thing about buying a home, even if it's just a starter home, is that not only is it more stable and predictable than the stock market, so a better investment than just investing your money into stocks, but the money that you spend on your mortgage is money that you already are spending. So you're not setting any additional funds aside. Your housing expense becomes an investment for you. And that's why I'm so obsessed with sharing about the power of real estate, because it's incredibly unique in the type of investment that it is. It lets you reroute money, right, from just kind of flushing it away towards your landlord into an asset that is extremely powerful and extremely rapidly appreciating. Okay, so just to kind of touch on that piece a little bit more, because I think that it's a little hard to separate ourselves from the idea of buying a house as being something really emotional, right? And wanting to have that like, oh, I love it so much feeling. That's a little bit of a luxury, I'm just gonna give it to you straight, that buying a house that you are incredibly emotionally attached to is a wonderful thing. And I've gotten to do it later in life, right? With the house that I own now, but I had to work to get there. And I think that that's kind of the key point of this class, and why this class is a little bit different than the other classes that we've taught, is that this class isn't just about buying a house. This class is about being a specific subset of people who are making their own wealth. And so the reality is that our journey there is going to be a little bit different, right? And it's going to be a little bit harder. I grew up, my mom didn't work when I was a kid. She stayed home with me. I was one of 4 siblings. My dad was a carpenter. So I think you can kind of put the pieces together there about what our financial situation was like. Obviously, later on, my mom became a realtor and she now has a really thriving business, and their financial position is different. But when I was kid and a young adult, and when I was buying my first house, it really was on me to try to build my wealth, right? And so something that changed everything for me was realizing that giving up that all or nothing attitude, right? Like I'm gonna not buy a home until I can buy a dream home, was shooting myself in the foot, and it's counterproductive, because investing in a starter home now, making that emotional sacrifice, understanding that actually you're doing something beautiful and wonderful and incredible, which is giving yourself that wealth that you're not getting from anybody else by making that sacrifice now, will help you achieve your dream sooner, right? So you can facilitate having the wealth and the dream life that you want, right? Without anybody handing it to you through a couple of strategies that we're going to talk about now.
Before I move on to the next, there was a comment, I don't know if you want to address it, from Ryan. I'm so curious
Yeah.
do you see that one?
I'm so curious how 24-year-old you acquired such a substantial loan. I'm 26 and pretty intimidated, not only by asking for that much money, but also living with that much debt. I'd imagine the Bay Area property inflation erased your concerns some. I qualified for that loan. I had an FHA loan. So I qualified in part because of my income, in part because the FHA loan requirements are different than the conventional loan requirement. So in essence, I got a different kind of loan than maybe you're accustomed to hearing about. And I living with that much debt. Yeah, but I mean, it's not like credit card debt where you're paying 25% APR, right? It's a single payment that's the same every single month for 30 years. So I guess that was how I dealt with it.
And Isaiah, we see your question, and we're going to speak to down payment
Yeah.
options coming up now. So your timing is perfect. So, how much down payment do you really need? Oftentimes, it is believed that you need 20% down, but there have been instances where you can do as little as 1% down. That would be with the specific down payment assistance program, but the standard guidelines are here in the center. With an FHA loan, you can purchase a property with as little as 3.5% down up to a loan amount of $1,209,000. With a conventional loan, you can put as little as 3% down if you're a first-time home buyer on loan amounts up to $806,000. 5% down is needed greater than $806,000. So there are options for a low down payment. And in future slides, I'm going to talk about down payment assistance options when you don't have the 3 or 5%. So if you have no savings, it has become a trend for advanced inheritance. And I know that today we're focusing if you don't have family money, but 401k is definitely allowed. It is my recommendation that you check in with your employer and your fund manager of your 401k to confirm what amount is available to you and if there is a penalty associated with drawing from your 401k.
Yeah, and I can speak to borrowing against your 401k because that was a pretty important part of my, down payment that was pretty small, but it was a large portion of that pretty small down payment. So I had a 401k through my job, okay? And I was able to borrow against it. The way that that works is that it's not a withdrawal, okay? It's a different way of pulling money out. It's considered a loan. You pay interest on it, but you pay interest to yourself. So it's essentially a free loan. I want to say that again. If borrowing against your 401k is essentially a free loan, you pay yourself back with interest. So I had it set up that I changed my automatic payment towards my 401k out of my paycheck to be a marginally more, a little bit more. Like I didn't totally feel the difference, but it basically I changed it to increase it so that it paid off my loan. I think it was over a year, maybe it was over 2 years that it would pay it all off, inclusive of the interest. The only downside is that you pay it back with after-tax money, okay, versus 401k contributions that are pre-tax money. So that is money that you're paying, right? But if you run the numbers and the property that you've acquired with the assistance of the money that you borrowed against your 401k appreciates more quickly than the money that you're losing by paying yourself back with after-tax funds, it does make sense, okay? So there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? Everything has pros and cons, but if your goal is to buy a house, right, which mine was, because I knew that it would appreciate rapidly enough that it would then allow me to buy another house, which would then appreciate rapidly, compounding my wealth over my lifetime. This short-term minimal loss and the difference between my before and after tax contribution was pennies in the long run.
So when you don't have a 401k and you don't have family money, there are down payment assistance programs available. A grant means that you do not have to pay the money back at all. A forgivable loan means that you receive an amount, and if you hold on to the house and that loan for a certain term, typically 5 years or greater, they will forgive the loan. There are a few programs that offer forgivable loans if you hold on to the property for at least 3 years. So when looking at different down payment assistance options, you want to look at if it's a grant, which is the best, but least available. Forgivable loans, if it is a property that you feel that you will live in for at least 5 years, it's a great option as well. Second mortgages is a second loan. So basically, they will give you the 5% down in assistance with either a monthly payment at the end of the 30-year term, or some programs do require a monthly payment immediately. So that is something that we want to compare. And there are shared equity programs. With a shared equity program, they will give you up to 20% down, typically, in exchange for a percentage of your equity. And so equity is the difference from your purchase price and market value. And specifically with CalHAPA, California Housing Finance Agency, had a program last year where they wanted 20% of your equity. So that's something that you definitely want to be mindful of, because a lot of our conversation today was about the growth and appreciation of your house. In a down payment assistance program that is sharing in your equity, when you go to sell or refinance that loan, at that time you will pay back a portion of the equity plus the initial assistance that you receive. One way to stay abreast of down payment options in your specific community is to start with this website, downpaymentresource.com. They will have a form where you fill out very basic information, your income, your credit, and it will tell you what programs are available in your state, city, and county, because there are different programs at every level. A national program like Shanoa is a specific FHA program. It will give you both down payment and closing costs. Home Ready is a Fannie Mae program, and Home Possible is another Freddie Mac program. Both of these will give you a reduced down payment and some money towards the closing costs. I spoke a little bit about CalHAPA. It's California Housing Finance Agency, so it's a state program. One thing to be mindful about with the CalHAPA program is the interest rate is higher than the market rate, and that is how they fund the program. So the monthly payment on that would be a little higher. This one is Golden State Finance Agency. AC Boost is a Alameda County. So when you are shopping for assistance, a couple of things that you want to do. In addition to checking out this website that I shared here, you also want to look at your local city website and look at their housing page. In addition to your county, there are below market rate properties available, specifically in the Bay Area. I know both San Francisco, Emeryville, and I think even Albany offers below market rate properties. Do you want to speak? Are you familiar with those at all, Ellie?
A little bit, like the Habitat for Humanity properties and so on.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what happens with the below market rate properties is they have specific criteria. You will find that all assistance programs have income limits and credit score criteria.
The
And
only reason that I kind of want to steer people away, it is a lot often there's rules about when you sell, having to sell
Yes,
it back to the organization and so on. So
correct.
that's my only consideration when I'm talking to clients about that style of property, is that they
Yes.
don't, as you know, they don't appreciate in the same way that a standard single family home does.
And even if it did appreciate, have a strong appreciation, you couldn't take advantage of it. It
Well,
goes like,
yes,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
a shared equity, correct.
Right.
Um, there are some programs that are specific, census tract programs that are specific to certain neighborhoods and based upon your income. So to learn your county's median income, here is the tool to do that. So if you want to know if your income will qualify you for a census tract program, what you would do is just use this. I mean, you can reach out to a lender, but this tool also will let you know the area median in your area.
That's what I also wanted to say, is that, Brenda, isn't it true that part of what you're doing with every client you're working with is running them through these programs, trying to connect them with any and all money that is available to them?
That is correct. So when we do your pre-approval, we're looking at your overall financial profile to see which of these programs that you qualify for, and then we compare them with you. So we'll jump on a Zoom call and tell you the pros and cons of each.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, of course, you as an individual, I'm speaking to the people in this class, can do all of this research yourself, but also a good qualified lender, um, like Brenda, who is interested in helping people in this way, is checking your eligibility for all of these programs. And so when you're working with a lender, this is just my advice to everybody. It's important that your lender is cognizant of this and cares about this, because there's a couple more hoops to jump through to help people qualify for grant money, to look up census tract programs for each property address that you're interested in. But a motivated lender will be your partner in this journey so that you're not doing all that legwork yourself.
Let's see if we had any questions specific to that before we move on. Actually, if you want to check it out while I speak to this,
Sure.
you
Can you share what a realistic down payment percentage would need to be in a competitive market like Berkeley? Yeah, so Berkeley is kind of a beast unto itself, where the majority of the time we're in a multiple offer scenarios and down payment amount really does matter, and we're looking at 20% or less. But, because of the kind of subject matter we're talking about here, that's not the type of market that we're probably talking about buying in, right? So if you are looking to buy a home in Berkeley, that's wonderful. And of course, your offer has to be competitive in a number of ways, but there are many, many opportunities for people with smaller down payments just outside of Berkeley. Oakland is adjacent to Berkeley. Richmond is adjacent to El Cerrito, which is another really coveted and competitive market. And so I really encourage people to look outside of the areas that they immediately consider to be nice and desirable and livable, because there's many, many wonderful places in the Bay Area that for whatever reason are maybe commercially, well, there's just less competition. I mean, part of it is that Oakland is just far, far, far larger than Berkeley, so there just is more real estate to be had. So there's many a market where strategies like this can and do fly. So that's what I'll say to that.
thank you. A few myths about what's required to make home ownership possible. You do not have to have perfect credit. And you don't even have to have a credit score. In the event that you have another borrower on your loan with a credit score. So when it comes to credit, FHA requires a 580 credit score. Conventional loans require a 620 credit score. But if you have, not perfect credit, you can still be approved for a loan. And a good lender, when they access your report, we do a soft pull, which doesn't have an impact on your score, that we will give you recommendations on what's needed to improve your score. And Ellie and I have a transaction going right now where we saw an opportunity for the borrower to increase their credit score. We gave them recommendations They followed those recommendations, and we were able to boost their score in little than 2 weeks. I've had scenarios where borrowers do not have a credit score. We add them on to their co-borrowers credit cards, just 2 cards. I had a recent scenario where the credit came in at 800. So working with a good, reputable lender, they're not just going to pre-approve you, they're going to give you strategies to improve your position.
And I see a question here that says, I'm curious how potential home buyers shop for mortgage lenders. Do you suggest to stay away from larger companies, any companies that specialize in first-time home buying? This is my advice. It's what I say to every single person who interviews me to be their agent, or anyone who's talking to me generally about buying a house. I really encourage you to work with a local lender. The difference between a large bank like a Chase or a Wells, and a lender who specializes in the area that you're trying to buy is dramatic. It's the difference between like shopping local versus buying from a giant corporation. It's a person who's invested in their community and in the lives and well-beings of the people that they live and work around. So that is my guidance always. I think most people meet their lenders through referrals from their realtors. And so I, as a realtor, am constantly referring people to local lenders who specialize in my market, because I know that their experience and the outcome is going to be dramatically different and dramatically better. Okay, strategies for entering an expensive market. Okay, yes. So the downside of living in a market where real estate is rapidly appreciating is that, of course, the barrier of entry is high. So a couple strategies to get into an expensive market, right? Because remember, what we're trying to do right now is just get our foot in the door. So we touched on a couple of these already, but number one, and this is sort of a hot topic, so I'm sure you guys have heard and thought about this before, but it's the idea of house hacking. Now, of course, there's traditional house hacking where you like buy a duplex and live on one side and rent out the other, or a triplex. But there's a far more approachable way to house hack, and it is to have roommates. So that is what I did with much success. You know, I, like most people, prefer to live alone. I would prefer to not have roommates, but remember, this is all about making sacrifices in the present moment so that we can build a better life for ourselves down the line. We're talking about our future here, right? So we are making decisions now that will benefit us later, and that is the power of wealth, right? Is what it can do for us over time. So taking a temporary reprieve from the pleasure of living alone and having roommates and collecting rent is a dramatic dramatic way to earn money over a short period of time and be able to pay a mortgage that you couldn't pay otherwise. And then fixer uppers. If you know me, you know this is one of my favorite topics. I constantly am encouraging people to ignore the look of the house that they're buying. Ignore the staging, ignore the paint, ignore the cool countertops. I promise you will pay 3 times for all of those things what it costs the sellers to put in. And I know that because I do that as a listing agent. I make houses look beautiful to bring them on the market because I know that they will sell for more. So when I'm representing buyers, I really encourage people to put on blinders about the cuteness of the house, right? Because cuteness is you'll pay an arm and a leg for something to be cute when you can pretty I don't want to say easily, but when you can feasibly do it yourself. So buying a cosmetic fixer, meaning a house that's a little weird and a little ugly, will make you so much money in the long run. Okay. The house that I own now was ugly. It was really ugly when I bought it. It was like I hated the floors and I hated all the finishes and the paint was super weird. But the fundamental things about it I liked, right? And so I knew everything else I could change. And I've just been slowly chipping away at changing those things over time. And the amount of equity that I have built in my home by doing those repairs myself rather than buying an already remodeled house is enormous. So if you are able to divorce yourself from the cuteness factor, you are doing yourself a huge favor. And then, Brenda, do you want to speak to this final point here?
Yeah, so buying with a family has become really popular, but purchasing with a family member More folks are wanting to be near their parents for support or things like that. So it's something to consider. We would use the income of everyone that is on the loan. We take everyone's credit into consideration. So that is another affordable way to approach an expensive market.
I'm just going to answer some questions really quickly. What
Okay.
if someone has okay credit and 3.5% down, but doesn't have a history of strong income? So actually, Brenda, maybe you can speak to that point because that
Yeah.
question, because it's an eligibility question.
Yeah. So with the income, we are going to look at a 2-year history, but the income that we're qualifying off of is your current income. So if you had a previous job, we'll look at that for history purposes, but the income that we're using is your current salary. If you were in school prior to your 2-year history or as part of that 2-year history, that counts. So if you are a recent graduate, we use that income or that history as part of your employment terms. My apologies. So hopefully that answers your question. If
And
for some reason if for some reason you weren't employed for 2 years and you have a gap, we just need a letter of explanation. And it can be as simple as I was looking for work and it's acceptable. So we can show that you have either a 2-year history of employment or education. It could even be like a 6-week program or a short program with a certificate. That's acceptable as well.
And then I also just want to say if the bottom line is that you just only qualify for a lower amount than you want to qualify for because of your income, that's okay. You just buy a cheaper house. You just buy the cheapest house in the nicest neighborhood that you possibly can, and then you wait it out. Like the market's going up, so just the sooner you get on the train, the better. Would one example of a local be a credit union? So yes and no. Sometimes my advice is to go with a lender who doesn't focus on banking. So your credit union's primary job is to be like a banking organization, not a home loan originator. So I would look for a local lending, loan broker where their whole gig is originating loans. And I can provide you with a list if you want to email me separately. I can connect you with some local lenders. Our own Brenda Wyatt is an excellent local lender. I'm sure this will be covered, but want to ask, what if you purchase a starter home and it turns out to have major unforeseen issues like a tree root growing through the septic tank? In this example, let's say this house is inspected. In this situation, you're basically out of all the money you would have gained in equity for an expensive fix. This is not covered in this class, so I'm glad you asked. What's your thought with this risk? My thought is to work with an agent who focuses intensely on the structural health of the home because this is a very real risk. This is why I practice real estate the way that I do, because we're not messing around here, right? This is all of people's money that they're putting forth into something that they likely don't totally understand, because who has such an esoteric knowledge set as to understand all the systems of a home, right? Besides a tradesperson who works in each of those discrete trades, right? So that's a scary risk. I know that's a major barrier for people. That's why I've devoted my life to educating people about structures to try to alleviate that risk. There's always some level of risk with every investment, but I really encourage you to build a team of guides around you. And by guides, I mean your lender and your realtor who understand how serious this is, who take it just as seriously as you do, and to work with a realtor who wants to teach you about every single component of your home rather than trying to just encourage you to close so that they can make a sale.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the next slide and then we'll come back to your question,
Totally.
Isaiah. We just want to make sure we cover everything, but we will have more time for questions and answers at the end. So we talked a little bit about house hacking, and I wanted to give you an example. Ellie mentioned there's many ways to do it and lots of ways to get creative. In this particular instance here, this is a client that purchased a duplex. For the front unit has 4 bedroom, 2 bath. The rear unit has 2 bedroom, 1 bath. They purchased it for $700,000. The current value of this property is $1,046,000. So in that time period, 3 years, they have 3-year appreciation. They have 346,000 in appreciation over 3 years. And with that, they have tenants that are offsetting their mortgage payment. In addition to tenants who are temporary, I believe they are also using a creative thing like Furnish Finder to have people rent out rooms in the house during the day. So they're using Furnish Finder and Peerspace. So for content creators to use the house, so that is a way that they are offsetting their mortgage. So in today's time, where there's so many ways to house hack, they have 2 rooms dedicated to Peerspace where people can rent it by the hour and it offsets their mortgage.
Wow, I've never heard of that.
No, yeah. I know someone who rented their house out for a Thanksgiving dinner and made $800. So yes, there's many ways to get creative to cover the mortgage. And one of the reasons why both Ellie and I have come together to put on webinars like this is because it's important not to get you into a home, but to get you into sustainable home ownership. We care about your financial future. That is why we started talking about budgeting. We go over numbers and many programs to help make the process and products that you select sustainable. Some of the things that go into sustainable home ownership includes financial readiness. So when pre-approving you, we're not going to look at what a lender will qualify you for. We're also going to look at your debt and your budget. So it's based upon affordability. So we'll show you your full buying power, but we want to stick with your monthly goals. These are some tips to make sure that you're in a sustainable situation, is to make sure you have an emergency fund. We'll look at different products such as fixed versus adjustable. Your pre-approval is going to help you to make an informed decision about how much you can buy. Buying the right home is about affordability beyond today. So we're going to work with you so that you can understand your future expenses, including maintenance costs and taxes. And you want to protect that investment. So we will help you and connect you with resources to help maintain your property. So we do have a resource guide. We will connect you with estate managers, and we at LaSalle, we have a list in our resource guide of folks who can help you, accountants and things like that, because owning a home is going to be it is an undertaking, and we want to make sure that you have the right support in order to sustain that home ownership.
Yeah, and to just quickly speak to costs, part of what I do with clients when we're looking at houses is talk about those costs in the short term and the long term. So I like to make a long, detailed spreadsheet that's laying out everything that we're going to be doing over the next 10 years, right? And what those costs are today. Now, obviously, costs evolve over 10 years, but we can kind of only budget in the here and now. So we might say, okay, the roof is 5 years old of a 30-year life. This is what a new roof, costs, or in 6 years, you're going to replace your furnace, and that's what this costs, so on and so forth, so that you can understand kind of when you'll need cash infusions at different periods of time. So I love to create that financial timeline with people. I know those costs in my brain, and I also can facilitate getting concrete bids from tradespeople, and that's part of what I do when I work with clients, so that none of those numbers are a surprise.
So we have come towards the end of our presentation today. The next steps in your home buying blueprint will be scheduling a consultation with either myself or Ellie, and we'll have the QR code at the end on the next slide for you to get that information. But it's important that you assemble the right team. Ellie, you want to talk a little bit about how a team makes a difference in accepting and getting your offer accepted?
Yeah, totally. And I also want to talk about getting pre-approved and why you should do it now, even if you want to buy a house in 4 years. I got pre-approved about a year before I bought my first home. That pre-approval was the blueprint for what my goals would be for the next year, because I understood that if I did X, Y, and Z with my credit score, I would qualify for X more, dollars in my loan. I understood how much more savings I needed to have in order to qualify for X, X being these placeholder numbers, right? So it gave me really clear next steps to work towards my goals, and it helped me understand where I was. So then I worked on saving, I worked on my credit score, right? This was a long-term process for me, many months. So I really encourage people to get pre-approved now. It's a check-in, and it's a blueprint for what your next steps are. Okay, and then talking about working with an agent and a lender. So buying a house is you're a little trio, right? You're a little team. So there's you and your partner, whoever you're buying with, and then your lender and your realtor. And the three of you are working together towards the same goal. Your lender owns the financial piece, right? Everything that you qualify for. And they talk to you about what your payments will be and what the structure of your loan is. And then your realtor owns and teaches you the house piece, right? The actual property itself. And so for most people, this is a world that you know nothing about. And why would you, right? You probably know a ton about your job and a ton about your hobbies, but you don't have to know a ton about this. And so we are your guides and your advisors to help you navigate this really intense and crazy next step. And I think that working with a discount professional on the most important transaction of your life is probably a mistake. And so I really encourage you to work with somebody that you trust, that you know has your best interest at heart, and who you know their values align with yours. Avoiding pitfalls, common mistakes first-time home buyers make. Brenda, do you have something like on your mind when you wrote this down?
Yeah, I think one thing that is common is folks count themselves out. To your point, that is the point in getting pre-approved so that you know your options. So don't self-diagnose. Talk to a professional, go over the areas that you are concerned about. And I think a lot of times you'll find that you're more ready than you thought you were. So yeah, I think number one is people self-diagnose if they're not ready.
I love that. No, you're so right. I think that's true. I think that, I mean, like I just said, it's a foreign world to most, right? So just start out with your pre-approval. That's your clearest first step. And then the next steps will become really obvious after that. And then it's just a matter of getting it done, which I know you guys can do. And I believe in you. Okay, we're gonna answer questions now, right?
Yeah, go to the Q&A because I think that we've been reading all the chat questions, but there are two in the Q&A that have been there for a little bit. You see that?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're just going to answer questions for the next like 10 minutes. Feel free to log off if have gotten what you need, or stay on if you have more questions, and we'll just dive into them. This is our contact information on the screen. I love, love, love talking with people about buying a home, and no strings attached, no pressure. Like, that's not what I'm in this business for. I just want to help in any way that I can. So I'd love to chat with you, and I know that Brenda feels the same. So these little QR codes let you book an appointment with us, or you can reach out to us directly. My website's ellieridge.com, and all my contact info is there.
Perfect. And before we jump into the questions and everyone drops, I do want to say that my firm, LaSalle Mortgage, is offering $500 off closing costs from anyone who's attended this webinar and does a transaction with us. So we will send you an email with the offer and our thank you for attending. So you'll probably get that tomorrow. But I just wanted to, first thank everyone for attending and let you know that we are going to give you money off of your closing costs.
Okay, cool. Let's dive into questions.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about forced appreciation with a small down payment? and for a primary home versus an investment home. I've seen this suggested online a few times for a first-time home purchase. Brenda, do you want to speak to that, forced appreciation?
Yeah, okay, so one, you said with a small down payment for a primary home versus an investment. So the down payment requirement is going to differ. Primary resident is what I spoke to earlier, where you can do as little as 3 to 5% down, but most time on an investment property, it is going to require 20% down. So you just want to make sure that you are clear about the requirements of the program that you are targeting. So it's a big difference, appreciation between two. And I think that appreciation is going to differ based upon where you're buying. Is that right? Or Ellie, when you think about an appreciation in the Bay Area, does it differ from city to city?
Yeah, although not as wildly as people might think. I like just was like running data as I am wont to do at appreciation between far-flung Richmond and then sort of more central Richmond that's zoned for El Cerrito schools. So it's sort of a more valuable area. And the appreciation year over year was shockingly similar. We just started from a lower place, right? So even if you sell for a lower amount, you also buy for a lower amount. So I would encourage you to have your agent run those numbers for you. Or I can run those numbers for you because I love data and spreadsheets. Okay, you mentioned working with local lenders, but I've seen websites like better.com, ownup.com, which compare rates from a lot of different lenders to give you options. Any thoughts about websites like these? Yeah, I mean, it's just like it just doesn't give you all the information you need. It's like one of those online pre-qualifications where you put in your own info, right? It's a very different than an actual lender or an underwriter looking at your profile as a borrower. Brenda, would you agree?
Yeah, and I would say, Eric, it doesn't hurt to get pre-approved by more than one. So if you're considering a Better or Own Up or some online company, you just want to have a local lender in addition to that, because there will be competitive offer situations where you need your terms to be tight. And I will tell you that sometimes the online services don't offer the quick close that we have and or that's needed to compete in our marketplace. So you just want to cover all bases, and it does not hurt to get approved by more than one. Ask if the lender is doing a soft credit pull, because that way it has no impact to your credit score.
Does getting a pre-approval ding your credit score? Rebecca, no. If the lender's doing a soft pull, so Brenda does a soft pull, most reputable lenders do a soft pull. Just make sure that that's what's happening. What advice beyond what was mentioned do you have for a Bay Area post-undergrad college student with less than 30K in savings? I mean, less than 30, that's still a lot in savings, who wants to start their home buying journey? What's a mistake you wish more people avoided, but often learn the hard way? Gosh, I mean, this was a lot of my great advice was in was in this presentation, but I would just stress again to not be afraid of an ugly house. Truly, truly, let your first house be an ugly house. Let your first house be a springboard for your future, right? Your first house has a job, and it's not to be cute, it's to make you money. So that's how I encourage you to think about it.
There's one here about how bad does PMI get after using an FHA loan. So FHA, well, any loan where you're putting less than 20% down is going to have mortgage insurance, whether it's an FHA loan or a conventional loan. But FHA mortgage insurance is on for the life of the loan. So you want to refinance out of that FHA loan as soon as you have 20% equity. So yes, there is an upfront mortgage insurance with FHA and a monthly mortgage insurance. So you want to compare the difference between conventional and FHA.
Do sellers typically have a bias against selling to people using FHA loans? Sellers want to make the most money that they can, and they want it to be a sure thing that the transaction is going to close, right? Of course, that's their goal because they're just people who have all their money invested in their house too, the same way that we all would feel if we were selling a house. So there's many a way to provide that assurance to a seller. on its face, no, there's nothing wrong with an FHA loan. What might feel scary to a seller is a small down payment, okay? But there's a lot of ways that we can beautify your offer and make your offer feel, be very compelling, even with a small down payment. And I mean, I can go into that in great detail, but I think that it's maybe maybe you and I can have a call and I can go into that in greater detail, whoever asked this question. But part of what we can do is in the way we structure our offer by waiving contingencies. So I guess in a word, no, if you are strategic and have a strategic realtor. That's what I'll say.
What does the loan process look like for those inheriting the house but rely on house hacking? So if I understand this correctly, if you're inheriting a house and it has a mortgage, it depends on how the house is held. If you're in a trust, because then you wouldn't need to refinance the loan. But assuming you need to refinance the loan, the lender is going to want to know that you have income to support the mortgage. So if it is a multi-unit, you can use rents from other units to qualify. So that's a way to house hack. But if it's a single family residence, lender, and you need a new loan, the lender's going to want to use your income to qualify. We've talked a lot about roommates, but most programs do not count that income towards qualification. There are very few products that allow, they call it boarder income, roommate income, to qualify.
Okay, well, we are at time. Thank you so much for coming to our class. And Brenda, do you have any closing words?
Yes, I would say one, put fire signs in the chat for everybody just attending. Part of you getting closer to your goal of achieving whatever it is, what you see for yourself when it comes to wealth is education. And you took an hour out of your evening to get closer to that. So let's just give ourselves all thank you. Fire signs in the chat. Thank you for attending. I will say that both Ellie and I love educating folks. We're available to meet with you one-on-one. So definitely reach out. We have time to answer your questions.